Resistance and perfection, terms that most of us who create images are familiar with. We want the best, but sometimes the tools that boast the highest quality come with a cost. They're not exactly convenient, which is why I've become drawn to smaller and smaller setups. Tools that fight off the resistance to lay around and do nothing. Tools that urge you to experiment. But can something so small really uphold any quality? This is GFX100RF, Fujifilm's most compact 102 megapixel digital camera. With an internal ND, included accessories, and the ability to essentially shoot at 4 different focal lengths in one body, we should feel spoiled. But there's been a lot of heated debate on this controversial camera and questions as to who it could possibly be for. Is the f4 fixed lens really worth the money? Will the lack of IBIS completely sabotage my images? And why would I ever need that many megapixels? This camera feels widely misunderstood by some and loved by others. But I'd have to see for myself. I was going to a new city, on a new mission, similar to the one Fujifilm sent me on in 2024 to release the X100RF. But instead of Tokyo, I was in Prague. I was speechless at first. The architecture was so grand, so detailed, so colorful, it felt almost fake. But making images here, it wasn't really resonating with me. My usual style was grittier, more urban, and moody. I felt out of my element here. I needed to change the way I was seeing things. There was a new feature. One that piqued my interest, yet seemed kind of silly at the same time. The aspect ratio dial. I was skeptical. How often would I actually change the setting? This feature existed on previous GFX bodies, however, it was never so readily accessible to us as its own dedicated dial. And I think that's what makes all the difference. 65 by 24, I became an instant fanatic of. The connection between motion picture film and still image were clearly married together in my head. I started finding frames that I normally wouldn't think of, and instead started creating my own type of Hollywood. I was flowing now, easing into the Prague landscape and relaxing my eye into familiar territory. The mindset of a filmmaker. One by one, my love letter to my TLR in the 6x6 film format. I was transported back to when I was first learning photography. Composing within a small square. Not always ideal, but felt somewhat comforting to me. But what's awesome about the aspect ratio dial is that if you shoot in RAW, you can still retain the full image frame. Less and less I found myself photographing with the traditional 3x2, and more did I find myself wanting to play, experiment, and learn how to make intentional decisions in camera about what my framing would be. A practice that I think was transforming me into less of a casual photographer and more into an artistic and expressive one. And what about the megapixels? 102 megapixels was flexible and forgiving, especially when I couldn't get close enough to my subject in time to capture the moment. That powerful resolution actually made the digital teleconverter make total sense. I've actually never been so blown away by the ability to crop an image so aggressively, nor did I ever find myself wanting to crop an image so aggressively than now. The possibilities of seeing now felt a little bit more open. But was I just falling victim to yet another shiny camera? For all of its shine, there are downfalls. But are the downfalls really as bad as the internet has made them out to be? This camera is by no means cheap, but its price is also reflected in the fact that it's a unicorn. No company has been able to create a camera this compact with this much resolution. And while I would have loved to see this camera have IBIS, a faster lens, a tighter focal length, I can say with much confidence that there wasn't actually many times I noticed the lack of IBIS. The lens is wide enough to offset most of the shake. And if you're dedicated to your craft, a lack of IBIS won't stop you from achieving slow shutter or low light photography. I wouldn't count low light as one of its strong suits, but I still got some low light photos I loved. The fixed 35mm f4 lens, I will admit sometimes did feel a bit underwhelming for the expectation of that medium format look, but most other camera options with faster lenses either sacrifice the small size or the resolution. And that's the thing. We want it all, but every camera comes with a sacrifice. However, there's something to be said about the camera that's actually easy to get out the door and the one that just sits on a shelf collecting dust. This camera is extremely convenient, limiting in some ways, but outrageously flexible in others. It's the perfect blend between opportunity and creative limitation. I think its niche falls simply to those that are dedicated to the highest quality and the most portability combined. It's for those who want to enter the GFX world without having to fatigue themselves with lens choices or bigger camera bodies. It's for the artists with an extremely on-the-go lifestyle who might see this as an antidote to their own resistance. This is for those who love those in-camera colors or raw files with incredible dynamic range. Fanatics of film photography, a premium feel, and aesthetics. Maybe this camera isn't for you, but it's for someone. And maybe it's not totally for me, although I obviously wouldn't mind having it. This camera offers something my other cameras don't, which makes it hard to pass up. But the argument of whether it has a place in my lineup of cameras is difficult to answer. I've strayed from the GFX lineup strictly because of their cumbersome size, but this one has opened the floodgates. My X100 VI is typically my go-to for photography. It made me feel free to create anywhere. But the new GFX100RF made me feel empowered to create something with more intention while actually challenging my photography eye. Sometimes a tool allows you to have more fun, and sometimes a tool forces you to adopt a creative mindset that actually makes you better. To me, this camera does both, and that is something worth paying attention to. Quickly, before my camera battery dies, thank you for watching that. We're just gonna go quickly over some questions that I didn't address in that video, but focal lengths, the digital teleconverter. It's obviously not gonna feel like those prime lenses that you would get in terms of like depth of field. It's essentially just cropping into the image like 4 times once you get to the last one. So just to clear that up. Video, let's talk about the video on it. So I did have some examples of some video clips in that little short film that I made. The video is good. The dynamic range is phenomenal. Color grading it, a beauty. It was a little digitally sharp because of the probably 100 megapixels or the optics of the lens, not really too sure. A little sharper than I would like. And I did put a lot of those into manual focus, and I ended up putting it on a tripod for some of those as well. I do think it looks really beautiful, but I do think there's some limitations obviously with video, and this is not gonna be marketed to filmmakers anyways, but I'm a filmmaker, so I thought I'd try it out. Third thing, who this camera is not for. If you shoot portraits, I wouldn't go for this camera. It's not giving in terms of like portraiture depth of field. I think it's a little limiting in that regard, and I don't think that, you know, it's marketed to be a portrait photographer's camera anyways. Oh my God, my fiance is here. Can I get this done? Last thing I wanted to address, would I buy this camera? Would I want it? Yes. Am I going to buy it? No. I think I'm good with the cameras that I have, but I do think this is a special camera. This camera put me in a different mindset, and I think that is incredibly important when it comes to gear, because you can buy the most expensive, most technically savvy, advanced gear ever, but if it doesn't inspire you to take it anywhere, and if it doesn't inspire you when you're in the moment creating, then I don't think it's worth it. I think a camera should let you have fun. I think a camera should let you play. I think a camera should still inspire you. You gotta get off the couch yourself, but I do think gear plays a part in that and like the mindset that you're in. So overall, I had a great time with this camera. Thank you for watching this, and I hope you guys tune in to future videos. Oh my God, I finished. I finished.